Hey guys, welcome to YesUsers Podcast. This is your host Avinash Tripathi. Today we are digging into the career of Sid Bharat. He is someone who has been able to blend deep expertise in AI with chops in growth marketing and product development. Sid is a pioneer who started one of the very first GPT-3 powered startups. Yeah, GPT-3, the precursor to ChatGPT, and he was also the growth architect with companies like Thinkerpip, where he scaled them to 20x. While he has recently moved on from his role leading the AI studio at Forum Ventures, he's channeling his expertise into an exciting new venture currently in stealth mode. So get ready for an insightful conversation with a leader who continues to bridge the gap between cutting edge AI and real world business growth, and perhaps we'll get a tiny hint about what he's building next. So let's start this podcast. So, Sid, welcome to Yes Users Podcast. How are you feeling?
Thanks for having me, Avinash. I'm feeling good. Excited to do a good podcast with you today.
Yeah, I hope so too. So, Sid, I was looking at your history, Bits Pilani, and then you worked for a couple hours. But I wanted to kind of go, earlier than that. So, how was your childhood? Like, where did you grow up? What was the childhood like?
Okay, yeah, that's a new one in the podcast.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was born in Bangalore, but my family lived in Nigeria for about 10 years. My dad's company moved him out there. So we were in Lagos, Nigeria, basically for a while. And so most of my like early childhood was over there. It's a very interesting period of my life because we would live there, and then every summer we would go on a vacation to a different country, like in Europe or America or somewhere else. So there was a lot of like traveling involved as a kid. We must have visited like 20 something countries when I was a kid. I don't remember most of it. But yeah, it was great and allowed me to like experience lots of different cultures. So, after we moved to India when I was around 10 years old, and I lived there for about 10ish years as well. Went to studied BITS Pilani and then moved to Canada. And so, like, moving to Canada, it wasn't much of a culture shock to get out of India. And, I've been traveling the world ever since, and it's easy for me to adapt to different countries and cultures because of my upbringing.
Wow, that's so interesting. And how was Bits Pilani? I've been to Bits Pilani once. I think I was there in 2015 or 16. So yeah, 5 years after you left. So tell me, how was Bits?
It was interesting. I get back when I was there, like 2006 to 2010, actually,
Right.
um, was when I was studying there. And it's a self-contained campus. So you're in the middle of the desert. It's hot in summer. It's cold in winter. So it's like 0 degrees in winter and then like 40 degrees in summer. And it's in the middle of nowhere. There's really nothing around it. Getting there, you have to go from Delhi or Jaipur with like a 3 hour bus ride or 4 hour bus ride. It's nasty. I mean, like you could take a cab, but it's still such a long and boring journey. And then even the campus itself there's not a lot there, right? It's like there was no heating, there was no AC. Like we had to make do way to survive. It's like survival, training. I think that's what I got the most out of bits is just like if you're in a situation that's not extremely comfortable, just like suck it up and do it, right?
Yeah, right, that's true. But as somebody like I know a lot of people who were dying to go to Bits Pilani. So what about you? Was it like kind of your dream college? Like you were eyeing for, IITs and like you couldn't get, so that's why you chose Bits Pilani. What was the scene there?
Yeah, it was basically that, right? Like I think every kid in India wants to go to IIT and do IIM and all of that, and um, your soul's dream of like your life being made at the end of it. And so that's why you do it. But you don't really know at that age. You don't know like what you want to do in your life. You don't know where you want to end up. And I would say like where I've ended up, I really didn't need Bits Pilani. I could have ended up here or doing much different things that are most suited for without Bits Pilani. I think Bits Pilani was good. It was fun and interesting for about 4 years, but it was more like a diversion than anything. And I ended up in a path that is very different from what I studied at Bits.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we'll skip over the first two jobs that you had, right? And jump to Tread Along and Adventure Inc., right? Which was selected by Chile Startup Fund. So tell us the story there.
Yeah, so that was my first foray into entrepreneurship because I was working at Deloitte at that point in Canada.
Right.
And it was just like 9 to 5 corporate job. Good place to work. I made a lot of great friends there, but it wasn't like fulfilling. And now I've always had like an entrepreneurial streak in me, right? And so I heard about the startup Chile thing. I had this idea for an app, like it was called Tread Along, and basically it was like kind of like a Foursquare but social, where you could like travel around. You're on a map. You can like pin things. You can like see what other people have pinned. It's a social network for travelers, basically, that was map based. And I wanted to build that. And so I contacted my friend from high school and went out to Chile. We got through the Startup Chile program, got some funding, went there, worked on it for a year. Through that time, we pivoted to the adventuring, which was kind of like Airbnb experiences, but before Airbnb experiences existed. And what we were doing was like actually we had a website where people could come and sign up for like a tour, and we would connect you with the local tour operator. Now, this being done in Chile, the volume was not high enough. Um, so we weren't like generating a ton of income, and eventually kind of just decided let it drop because we couldn't really take it forward. It wasn't really doing much. Yeah, that was the story.
Yeah, so I can relate to. So tell me about the fact, like, have you ever thought that instead of moving to Canada, if you have moved to the US, you would have been on H-1B visa? Like, so would you credit the fact that you were in Canada that you could, go out and do a venture, which is almost impossible for somebody who is in the US?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, like when I went and did it, I was not even a Canadian citizen at that point. I was still an Indian citizen, so I was on an Indian passport. But the Chilean government, they created like a lot of pathways for people to do the program. They expedited a lot of things, just like a bunch of paperwork. But I think like in general, like being in Canada, I haven't had to go through all of this H-1B stuff and the pain. It was easier to get citizenship in Canada, and then like I actually lived in San Francisco for about a year after I got my citizenship, and it just becomes a lot easier that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were not Canadian citizen, but you had that option that you had that like, on the back of your mind that if things don't work out in the startup, I can come back and work in Canada. What's the rules and regulations there? Is it possible or you can't do
Absolutely, yeah. Like, I mean, if things didn't work out, I could always come back to Canada. And like, also the cool thing about being in Canada is you can work with American companies,
that? Right.
and a lot of American companies will hire Canadians, either bring them into the US or like let them stay in Canada, but they'll pay you in US dollars, which is really cool. So
Right. Very interesting. So yeah, when you were doing venture, like I think one of the hardest part of any startup is deciding when it to close, right? Because let's say it's your baby. So how did you decide? Okay, now we have to give it, give a. What was that conversation like?
there's a in Silicon Valley, there's always a stock of product market fit. Like if you find product market fit, then your startup is going to be successful. And it's not easily defined, like no one has really defined it. The best definition is product market fit when you know it's product market fit or something to that extent.
Right.
Basically you know you if you have to ask whether you have product market fit, then you don't have product market fit. Um, and so I think if you're working on a startup and it's a slog and it's difficult and it's like after a while you're just doing it and it's nothing's working and you're trying different things, and then you're not reached product market fit, and perhaps there's like you know maybe it makes sense to pivot. you know
Yeah.
in some startups, like you have to go through a number of different attempts at pivots, right? Like you don't get like you know you go out, you hit a shot, you might get out, but it doesn't mean your career ends there. You have to keep going on and hitting more balls, and then eventually you'll get a century, right?
Absolutely. And that's what the hardest part is because, you have to take the feedback. Definitely. Like when the world is saying that, this is not working, you have to listen to that. But as an entrepreneur, you also have to, like, be, you know, determined to get it done because, whatever new thing you try to invent, initially everybody will be opposed to that. When it becomes successful, then people like, so how do you distinguish between the fact that, that the market is saying that something isn't working and like, being determined and persevere through the hardship? Because whatever started will be, you will go through that hard phase where, things won't be working, but you just have to slog through.
That's it's like a sort of a fine balance there, right? Like you can't give up too early, And then, like if you keep slogging through, it's also a bad thing if it's never going to work out, you know?
Yeah.
Now it depends on your goals. Is this what kind of company do you want to build? You just want to build something that will make you $10,000, $20,000 a month, like MRR, then, and you're comfortable there, then that's fine. If you want to build something a lot bigger, and you're getting stuck a lot and things aren't working out, then that's a different question, right?
Right.
So depends on that, and then depends on how long you've been at it and how much conviction you have in this idea, and like, like the size of the market and all of that. If you take all of that into consideration, there's sort of like a fine, like a period of time where it's like you've put in enough, you've tried enough different things, and you've not got the results, and there's maybe you're giving up other opportunities by pursuing this, right? Or persevere with this. So you have to think about like what is the opportunity cost as you keep working on this idea that's not going anywhere, and you know you've spoken to 100 different customers, 100 different VCs, and everyone is saying no. You have to think, okay, well, you could keep working on this and try to make it a success, or maybe there's like some other idea that's similar or in the space where you could pivot to that might that has more pull. So you kind of have to like look at where the market is pulling you as well sometimes, right?
Right, absolutely. I completely agree with you. That's what I was saying. But I'm saying, like, you, as two of you who are, Indian born, and you are going and pitching on a travel idea, do you feel that, there was a little bit as a founder profile, you were on a disadvantageous side? Did you ever feel that?
No, I don't think I've ever felt that way. I mean, like, I did the pitching back then, but I've also like in 2020, I started a company called Broca, which was an AI startup, AI marketing platform. It was one of the first like to launch on GPT-3's API.
Yeah.
Um, and then we went and raised funding, and I didn't feel like I had a disadvantage. Maybe I've had an advantage because like a lot of the VCs.
So, to my point, earlier you were pitching out a travel startup, right? And like, there's a some perception attached to it, wake up brown guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think like pitching a travel startup, that idea, we just made a video and we got accepted into this thing, and it was like, okay, great. So I didn't really like, and maybe I was too young and naive back then to know what it was really like to pitch and stuff. But in my real sort of fundraising thing came in 2020, 2021 when I was doing this AI startup. Um, and I'd already like made a lot of connections in the VC and tech world. I'd worked in San Francisco, and I think being brown in San Francisco is a bit of an advantage because look, only brown people running the show there. So like all the VCs, all the engineers, all the CEOs are brown. So like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So very interesting. So tell us about, like, you just closed your venture. This is a problem a lot of entrepreneurs face. Like, how would you go and apply for a job? What would like your story be?
Yeah, I mean, I never actually applied for a job. I shut it down, and then there was a period of time where I was very like upset about the whole thing and very sad about it. And so I wanted to travel the world and like get my mind off it and like restart. Um, so I took a bit of a break, and then, like because of my network, I decided, hey, I maybe I just want to do some consulting and travel for a bit. So I got in touch with a few folks and I got some consulting contracts, just like warm introductions. And then eventually, like, I was working at Forum Ventures most recently, and they were the ones who had funded my AI startup. And I knew the partner there because he'd funded me. And so I was talking to him and just like sharing some ideas that I had about like things that I wanted to do next. And he was like, hey, we're hiring and we want someone to help us build an AI studio. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool because it's all about building AI companies. And so that's how he hired me. But it was no like, I didn't go out and apply again. I just like, you know, I don't think I've ever had to apply for a job.
Not issues.
So, yeah.
Closed Adventure Inc. and started working with Lemon Stand. What was the story back then?
Yeah, no, I didn't. I actually, after I closed adventuring, I did some traveling again. And then I started like a blog because I just, I enjoy writing. So I was like starting a blog on like marketing and stuff like that, just like documenting what I'd learned through my journey building adventuring. And I got into like this e-commerce space, and I was talking to folks there. And the Lemon Stand is an e-commerce platform. It's like Shopify. Um, I ended up interviewing the CEO for my blog on just, some of the stuff they were doing. And I sent him some like ideas for marketing afterwards. I was expecting that, to get like a consulting contract out of it, but he was like, "Hey, we actually need someone to do all of this stuff for us. Can I hire you?" I was like, "Okay." So I joined full time there. And then same thing with the company after that, Thinkific was, that's an online course platform. Same thing there. I like, you know, through my blogging, I ended up meeting with the CEO and I was giving him some ideas and he was impressed and he's like, "Hey, can you join us?" And, that's how it happened.
Very interesting. So, in both the companies, Level 7 and
Yeah.
Thinkific, you were the eighth employee or you joined 7% team back then.
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember, but I think seven
Right.
planet. Yeah, very early on. Yeah,
So how was it different from working in your own startup and joining your early stage startup? Is it the same or is it different?
it's a little different. I guess, like at that stage, like there's a product already. There's like specific functions in the company. There are like certain ways. Like there's already a bit of a company culture that's formed, and you're sort of joining in there. But at the same time, it's early enough that you get to like shape it yourself, be a part of that, grow that culture, or shape the direction of the product in the company.
Very interesting. Yeah. So there is something about your consulting experience. You have worked with Cohere, you have worked with
Yeah.
iPhone, a lot of big names there. So what kind of assignments you do? Can you tell us some interesting story there?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of my consulting is just like helping these companies figure out their marketing channels and scale it. So
Right.
I come in at a point where, maybe they've raised some money and then they have like some marketing going on, but now they're like, okay, we've raised money, we need to grow faster, right? There's always that investor pressure. And so that's usually when I come in and I look at their existing marketers in house and then I put together like a strategy based on their product and company in the market, and then start to execute and test out different channels, right? Like,
Yeah.
does content work for this company? Does ads work? Does affiliate marketing work? Does partnerships work? And we start doing that and building it and scaling it out. And so I've done that with a number of these different companies, either just like as a pure consultant where I'm like advising them and they're doing the work, or even just like coming into the company as a fractional CMO. Like I did with Cohere. I think I was embedded in the company for a while. um, they had a few marketers in house, and we had like an agency for ads and for content. So I was like sort of, you know, coordinating everything and making sure they followed like the strategy.
Yeah.
Um, there's a company in San Francisco called Gorgeous that I did that for as well. Well, I came in as a fractional CMO and worked sort of full time for a few months with them, helped them set everything up, and then I left. Um, and then yeah, a few others where like I was more of just like advisory consulting, and they had a team and I would sit with them for a couple of hours every week and like, coach them, give them direction, like help them with strategy, all of that kind of stuff.
Very interesting. So, you are, I think, living your startup dream vicariously by helping so many startups and early stages. So, no, that's like, it's confusing because a lot of your companies say like, should we be hiring an advisor? Should we be having this kind of fractional CMO? I'm a bit conflicted on this topic because I believe that, startup is either you are with the startup or not with the startup. There is no part-time thing that, especially in the early stages. So
Yeah.
what would you say? Like, how would somebody differentiate between you and an advisor? Like, what would be the difference there?
Yeah, I think it makes sense sometimes to have like that advisor or fractional person come in and guide,
Right.
because I think at a startup stage, especially since you don't have so many, even if you're raised in a seed round, you don't have like a ton of money to burn, right? And hire a full team. So I think like the core product should be in-house, but things like marketing can be sort of like you can get an external person to come in and help, because that doesn't require like the like the in-house product knowledge of the you need to know a bit about the product, but you know you don't need to know like the strategy and direction of the company.
Yeah.
If you're doing marketing or specifically doing like ads or something, then you can just come in with, you can bring an external resource who has that specific expertise, and instead of hiring them full time, you're saving money there as a company, and you're getting that additional expertise that you didn't have.
Right. Makes sense. So, tell us about the content that you have been creating. So, like, I Reddit SaaS advertising playbook 2020, and then it was revised in 2025. So yeah. So which piece of content you are most proud of that you have created?
I wish I had like some massive hits, but there were, I think on my personal blog, there's one that's really doing well, and it like, you know, I had like someone from Ernst and Young reach out to me because he was recommended to me by ChatGPT.
Right.
Um, and that's a blog post on the Google's agent development kit.
Okay.
This year I've been doing a lot more like AI agent stuff, and so like exploring different tools and platforms and frameworks, and that's one framework that I explored when it first came out, and I created this big blog post on it, and that probably is doing like 50% of my blog traffic right now.
Yeah. So you are saying the things that is popular, the thing that is getting traction, are the most proud of that. But I'm
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, like that's something proud. But there was one blog post I'd written way back when, like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago or something.
sure.
Actually, oh, I did do a really good blog post when I had my AI startup broker in 2021. That was 30, 60, 90-day plan for marketers. And it was basically, we interviewed a whole bunch of marketers and we created this massive blog post of like, how do you do a 30 to 60 to 90-day plan when you first join a new company? And that became like, that was ranking one in Google within a few weeks, like getting a ton of leads and customers. It was
Ma-
amazing. It was just like pure organic, pure traffic. Yeah.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I think I did one for Thinkific as well, which was really huge. When I was there, got like 30,000 visitors on the first day itself. It was crazy. We did like a proper launch for that one. That was the campaign itself, like massive blog post and everything you need to know to create an online course. Um, so that was a good one. And then, yeah, I had some good ones in like Lemon Sand, which just like drove all the traffic and customers for the website.
Very interesting. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, one thing I have been seeing consistently you doing is creating some kind of a pillar content all throughout your career. So, what,
That strategy has always worked well.
yeah. So, tell us about what, how did it come? What kind of strategy you implement to make sure, like, what should be the topic, what depth I should be going in?
I go into like crazy depth sometimes, man. I'll go into like 20K words as well. Like Google post for my blog is 20,000 words. It was massive, obviously with the help of AI. But even back in the day, before AI, I would do things like that, and it would take me a lot longer, obviously. But it's just like, you want this blog post to be like the ultimate guide to whatever that topic is. That topic could be anything, right? Like, but obviously it depends heavily on the industry you're in. If you are trying to build AI projects, it should be around AI. If you're like, doing something HR, a good sort of starting point is like, like just try to build the ultimate how-to guide for your industry. And that, whatever your industry is, like if you're selling email marketing software, like the ultimate guide to email marketing, right? And everything, everything you've ever learned about that topic, interview other people, get their opinions, put it all together, create this massive blog post. That will be a pillar, right? And then you can go from there.
Absolutely. And I've seen that you're writing a lot about generative engine optimization, like, how to make sure that the chat GPT is recommending your products. And as you mentioned, like, you are also getting recommended by it. So tell us about your interest there. How did you first learn about the topic and what is your experience so far?
When I was running the AI studio at Forum, like this was an idea that we'd come up with. This was about a year ago. Um, and I started to hear chatter about how like a lot of people were using ChatGPT to search for things, right?
Right.
Um, and have ChatGPT recommend products and services for them. And so, like, obviously back then, a year ago, the fraction, the volume was quite small. And it's grown dramatically over the past year, but it was so small back then when I was talking to companies, and they were like, "Yeah, we get a few, but it's not a lot, and it's not like something we think about. Like, great if we get one additional visitor or whatever, right?" Um, so I kind of like let that topic go for a while. And then this year, as sort of like, I think ChatGPT had like another viral moment with the whole Ghibli thing. So many more people started onboarding and started using it. And of course, there's also Perplexity, and Gemini is doing a ton of marketing, and Claude and so on. Um, and companies started noticing increasing volume from ChatGPT going to
Yeah.
their website. And so there's renewed interest in this whole thing. This is, I'd known about it for more than a year. I know how it works. I know how these language models work. I've been playing them ever since they were available. Um, so I was like, you know what? Like, let me just put an article out and see if people are thinking about this as well. And yeah, I wrote that, and it also is a really well performing article. It gets a lot of
Yeah.
traffic.
Very interesting. I don't know whether you know that I run a startup called AI Monitor, and we do just generative engine optimization. So you're free, try on our product and give us an honest review. I really appreciate that. And
Yeah, yeah. Tell me more. Like, how does it work?
okay, you want to know my story. The way I was running a startup, right? And I was running, I was like happy being a startup. One day I was researching something on it, and Microsoft Copilot said something, this startup shouldn't be trusted because it doesn't have a lot of information around it. And I was like, how dare you say something about that? So how dare you say something about my child? Well, because for me, my startup was my child. So I started digging into the picture, like, how these generative engines and so what make decisions, what large language model does. I was absolutely oblivious with that. So I'm a lawyer with self-taught coder. So yeah, so that's who I am. Right. So I met with a lot of people at Meta. We met people with Google and ChatGPT. We couldn't meet at that time, but more or less everybody said, like, this this is out of your league, dude. But we kept at it, and this is much before even though the industry had a name, right? So industry.
Yeah.
So then there was a research paper from Princeton and IIT Delhi came out, and they kind of named it the generative engine optimization. So yeah, so then there was a lot more renewed interest in it, because when we were saying that you can actually influence these things, people were having a hard time understanding that. But yeah. So right now, like 25 to 30 odd techniques are known to the humankind how to influence generative engines. Uh, Out of those 25, 10 has been discovered by our team, and like desktop of 15, 20 has been discovered by other teams. So yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
Nice. It's like software, basically. Someone come in, sign up, and then like you will help them. Yeah, yeah. Or to analyze your website or something.
So yeah, so the first stock, see, when we started, there was nobody doing this. So there was no one. Like we started in 2020, like 2023, end of the 2023. So nobody was doing this, right? So back then we had to build everything from the scratch. So we built our own tools, but when we built our tools and showed it to the people, they were like, "So what am I supposed to do with this? Okay, I'm not coming there. So what do you want me to do?" So like, okay, we'll help you get there. So that's how it started. Uh, and for a really short time, we were like we became famous on the internet. If a generative engine is saying something negative about the startup, this Avinash can take care of it. So I still remember we had this guy from India. So according to Google AI overview, if you search worst basmati rice to make biryani, I think you will get the reference. A lot of people don't right. So their name was coming up. So we were like, no, we have to get rid of it. So luckily we were able to get rid of. Now another company is making coming up there. They had actually talks with us. So how to get rid of it. So that's the story we do. So yeah,
Nice.
uh,
That's awesome.
again you say so.
No, I said that's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks for putting me sponsored content. They're like, if he's advertising his product. And one of the things I really liked about your SaaS advertising playbook is that, you recommended targeting people at different stage of sales funnel with different type of content, right? I think that's very deep insight, and a lot of people kind of ignore that thing. So they believe like we have to do content. Okay, so this is like, it's, you can't do that. And that's what we like, we are implementing this in generative engine optimization. in an amazing way. I'll tell you that, but I wanted to get your insights. How would you approach that to a SaaS marketer? What advice would you give us to implement this?
Yeah, it really depends on how well you know your customers, right? And you built out really good customer personas. You can map out your customer journey. It just this customer journey is kind of like it's a standard concept that was a marketing concept back in the day, which I think is forgotten nowadays with like the new generation of marketers. But essentially, it's you don't wake up one morning saying you need a new CRM or email marketing software, right? Like
Right.
you go through these stages where first you have your regular day and you don't really know you have a problem, and one day you're like, oh, you have a problem, like you don't have a way to automate, to create large scale marketing campaigns. Okay, so then you start to like do some research and stuff like that, and trying to figure out what it is, and you're in the awareness phase where you're just trying to learn things and you're asking questions. You're not ready to buy a product yet. Then you come into like a sort of a solution aware stage, which is like decision, where it's like, okay, now you know like what the problem is, and there are solutions that exist. You can either hire someone or you could use a software or whatever. So there you're still like trying to figure out what is the best solution for you, but you're like looking up different brands and stuff. And finally you get into like a decision phase basically, where it's like you're trying to decide whether to buy this product or not. And so at each step of this, it's you have different questions in your head, right?
Yeah.
Like, our amazing features are not going to matter to you when you're still in the awareness phase where you don't even know what like the problem is. You're still doing research. So, so yeah, that's basically yes.
Yeah. And see, the practical problem that comes when you implement this thing, right? I have one website, I have one landing page, right? How would I differentiate it for different kind of users? That's one of the problems come. So what would be your advice on that?
You should have multiple pages. You should
Yeah.
have multiple different pages with different content depending on like what people want. And how you get that content found is like a different question altogether. But you know, that's why your blogs is typically content for awareness. And that's why you have like product specific landing pages, which are more around like the consideration decision phases, right? The homepage is just like usually kind of like a summary of what it is you do, but and it's more like curious people who end up there. But like when you have specific landing pages, that helps a lot. So you should be creating a ton of different landing pages for various consideration based questions.
Right. Amazing. And getting a little tactical here. So my advice to some of the people is that, if the people, if the user is in the earlier stage, don't try to sell him the product, right? Just try to get him to sign up all for a newsletter and something along those lines. If you identify like this type of content is attractive, this type of users, so what should be my CTA there? So any insights on how would you identify this? Like, where the user and its like user journey is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you can identify it by just. I mean, it depends on like what the customer is or the person is aiming at that stage, right? So usually, like if they are in an awareness stage, they're just like they're researching things. They're still like reading up online or watching videos or asking for advice and stuff like that. And so typically like those are like your channels of your blog, your YouTube, podcast, for example. Um, if they're in a consideration phase, they're more like directly looking at specific options and stuff like that. Are they trying to like get recommendations, or they're basically like doing brand searches and stuff. And then if you're in the decision phase, then they're like actively exploring a brand and trying signing up for things. So like based on that, like if people are signing up, they tend to be more in decision, whereas if people are reading a blog, they tend to be more awareness. People are visiting a product landing pages, they tend to be more consideration, that kind of thing.
Yeah, very interesting. So now let's come back to your current job, Forum Ventures, right? So how would you define it for people who don't know Forum?
It's a SaaS accelerator for B2B startups like Y Combinator. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically it.
It's so interesting when you brought Y Combinator. So how could it look like? What is different between Y Combinator and Forum Ventures? Other than the fact
Honestly,
you guys
if
focus
specifically,
on B2B.
yeah, specifically focus on B2B SaaS, and like this, it's a smaller. We take Forum takes in smaller groups. I actually left the company earlier this year to start my own company again, my own AI startup. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm sort of still like doing some consulting for them. But yeah, I mean, I was there for like almost 3 years. So it started off as an accelerator. It's different from IC in that it's just focused on B2B, and and there's more like hands-on with the company. So we don't take like, I don't know how many YC takes, like 200 per batch. We take like 20 per batch, right? But beyond that, every VC and every accelerator is basically the same thing. They just they're there to give you money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, money is a big part, no doubt about it. So you have left Forum Ventures or you're with them? I'm not aware. I could understand.
Oh yeah, I left them. I left already.
Okay. So,
Just exploring some new ideas for a startup. But yeah, basically that.
oh, very interesting. So is it in stealth mode or you can share with our listeners?
It's I haven't really come across something quite yet. I mean, we're exploring a bunch of like different AI agents in like marketing and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
still trying to like see which path to take, but we're just testing out a few. I'm just doing some custom builds for like different companies right now, custom AI agents for VC funds, SaaS companies, whatever.
Yeah.
And then seeing which one is kind of getting a lot of interest, and then trying to turn that into product.
Very interesting. That brings me. I think why you were there with Forum Ventures, Base AI was acquired by Forum Ventures, right? So how was the process? Were you involved? What was the hypothesis? Why did you guys do that?
Well, it was more like a Vance is basically one of the companies we built out of the studio. So I
Right.
ran the AI studio. And the studio is different from the accelerator in that we don't just invest, we also build the company. So we actually have engineers on team who will work with founders to build their product. And so that was even smaller. We were only doing like 7 or 8 per year. Um, and Vance was one of them that we built, which is a platform to um, help automate the due diligence process for VC funds. And we were using it internally as well while we were building it. And we realized that it was a really good platform to sort of like keep to ourselves because it was giving us a competitive advantage. So we just decided to like, get the rest of the equity from that and use it internally instead of like spin that off into a company.
Right. I don't know whether it is a cliche, using AI to find AI. I think it sounds
Yeah.
it
That's basically what
whatever.
that's how it is, man. Like it's using AI to fund AI, but like the AI is being built by AI and then like it's being marketed by AI. It's all just AI.
Amazing. So yeah, thanks. With this we've come to the end of the podcast. So last interesting question. What advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh, maybe one is like maybe can like stick to one thing. I think my 20-year-old self like loved jumping around from one thing to another and trying out different things. And I ended up becoming a generalist instead of like a specialist, which I think like right now makes sense in the AI age. But yeah, it would have been nice to have like maybe stuck to one thing and like, because when you stick to something for a period of time, the compounding takes over and gives you like a lot more of an advantage. Um, but like you can only connect the dots looking backward. Yeah, I think maybe that would be it.
Yeah, I completely understand you. That's the same story of my life as well. So I also ended up doing a lot of stuff, like from 60 to 5. So yeah, but I think that quality makes you a good founder because you know almost everything, but you're not good at it. Right? So that's I
Yeah.
knowing that you are founding a company or in the process of founding a company. I think it may not be such a bad thing. So Sid, thanks a lot for coming on the Yes Users podcast. We look forward to hearing about the new startup that you end up doing. We would love to support it in whatever we can. And we would love to have you back and share whatever you can about the startup.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, man.
My pleasure. Okay, sir.
Thanks, Avish. Bye.
That was incredibly insight conversation. Thank you, Sid, for sharing your invaluable insights with us. To our listeners, we hope this episode has given you plenty to think about regarding the future of AI and innovation. As always, don't forget to subscribe to Yes Users Podcast for more conversations like this. Until next time, this is your host Avinash signing off.